In a bustling city where skyscrapers touched the clouds and dreams were both made and broken every day, there lived a woman who had defied all odds to reach the top. Her name was Ava Thompson, and she wasn't just any successful person. She was one of those rare individuals who turned their struggles into stepping stones. By the age of 35, she had built an empire from scratch. She was the founder and CEO of a tech company that had changed how people handled money across Africa and other parts of the world. Her company, Thompson Innovations, wasn't just another startup. It was a game changer in mobile payments, making transactions easier, faster, and more secure for millions of users. From farmers in remote villages to business owners in big cities, her technology had transformed lives. And yet, despite her incredible success, Ava's journey hadn't been easy. As a black woman climbing the ladder in industries dominated by men, and mostly white men, Ava faced challenges that others couldn't even imagine. There were times when people underestimated her, doubted her abilities, or outright dismissed her ideas simply because of how she looked. But Ava didn't let any of that stop her. Instead, she used it as fuel to push harder, work smarter, and prove everyone wrong. Every milestone she achieved became a victory not just for herself, but for anyone who believed they could rise above societal barriers. On a bright Thursday morning, Ava decided to step away from her busy schedule for a quick errand. Dressed in a sharp navy blue suit that perfectly matched her confident demeanor, she walked into a branch of Sterling Trust Bank. The bank's interior sparkled with polished marble floors and gleaming counters, exuding an air of sophistication. This wasn't just any bank. It was one of the largest financial institutions in the country, known for catering to high-net-worth clients. Ava had chosen this particular branch because it was close to her office, and she needed to withdraw a significant amount of cash for an upcoming acquisition deal. For someone like her, whose account regularly handled multi-million-dollar transactions, withdrawing $50,000 wasn't unusual. In fact, it was almost routine. Little did she know, though, that this seemingly ordinary visit would turn into an unforgettable experience, one that would expose deep-rooted biases and force her to take drastic action. As Ava approached the counter, she greeted the teller with a polite smile and handed over her checkbook. "I'd like to withdraw $50,000, she said confidently, expecting the process to be smooth and straightforward. After all, she had been banking with Sterling Trust for years, and her accounts always reflected her status as a prominent business leader. But what happened next caught her completely off guard. The teller hesitated, glancing nervously at his computer screen. His expression shifted from professional courtesy to something resembling suspicion. After a few awkward moments, he excused himself and called over the branch manager, a middle-aged man with a practiced smile and a clipboard in hand. "Good morning, ma'am," the manager said, introducing himself. "I'm Richard Langston, the branch manager. Can I assist you with something?" Ava nodded, explaining her request once again. But instead of processing the withdrawal, Richard began asking questions that felt more like an interrogation than customer service. "Are you sure this is your account?" he asked, his tone laced with doubt. "Yes, absolutely," Ava replied, pulling out two forms of identification. One was her driver's license, and the other was a company ID card featuring her photo alongside the logo of Thompson Innovations. Both documents clearly proved her identity, yet Richard continued to scrutinize them as if searching for some hidden flaw. "I'm sorry, ma'am," he finally said, shaking his head. "We can't process this request right now. We'll need further verification." At that moment, Ava realized this wasn't about following protocol or ensuring security. This was about something deeper, something rooted in bias and prejudice. Despite her impeccable appearance, undeniable credentials, and calm demeanor, she was being treated as if she didn't belong in this space. It was a feeling she knew all too well, but experiencing it here, in her own bank, stung more than ever. Instead of reacting impulsively, Ava took a deep breath. She knew the situation required more than anger. It demanded action. What happened next would leave everyone involved speechless and set off a chain reaction that no one could have anticipated. After hearing the manager's dismissive response, Ava felt a mix of emotions, anger, frustration, and disbelief, all swirling inside her. But she didn't let it show on her face. Instead, she stood there calmly, her posture straight and her voice steady. She knew this wasn't just about her anymore. This was about every person who had ever been treated unfairly because of how they looked or where they came from, and she wasn't going to let this moment pass without addressing it head-on. "Mr. Langston," she said firmly, locking eyes with him. "Do you know who I am?" He hesitated for a second, clearly thrown off by her directness. Then, with a shrug that seemed more rehearsed than genuine, he replied, "You're a customer here." "Yes." Ava shook her head slightly, her lips pressing into a thin line. "No, sir, I'm not just any customer. My name is Ava Thompson. I'm the CEO of Thompson Innovations. You might have heard of us. We're the company that processes billions of dollars annually through partnerships with banks like yours. And yet today you've decided to treat me as if I don't belong here." Her words hung in the air, sharp and unyielding. The room grew quieter, and even the teller behind the counter stopped what he was doing to listen. Richard, caught off guard, tried to regain control of the situation. "Ma'am, we have protocols in place for everyone's safety," he stammered. "It's nothing personal." But Ava wasn't buying it. She could see right through his excuses. This wasn't about safety or protocol, it was about bias, plain and simple. And she wasn't about to let him brush it under the rug. Without waiting for his permission, she pulled out her phone and opened her banking app. With a few taps, she brought up her account details, showing him real-time access to her funds. She scrolled through recent transactions, highlighting the massive amounts moving in and out of her account daily. "Does this look like fraud to you?" she asked, her tone cutting but controlled. Richard shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact. But Ava wasn't done yet. She switched to her internet browser and started pulling up articles about herself. There were headlines from major newspapers, interviews on national TV shows, and features in business magazines, all showcasing her achievements and contributions to the tech industry. One article even described her as one of the most influential entrepreneurs of her generation. "This is me," she said, holding up her phone so he could see. "This is my life's work. And still, you questioned whether I own my own account. Tell me, Mr. Langston, would you have done the same if I were someone else? Someone who looked different?" The question hit him hard and he had no answer. His silence spoke volumes. It was clear that Ava had struck a nerve, exposing the uncomfortable truth beneath his actions. Feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on him, Richard attempted to backtrack. "Look, ma'am, I apologize if there was any misunderstanding. Let's try to resolve this quickly." But Ava wasn't interested in empty apologies. She had already made up her mind. "Save your apologies," she said coolly. "What happened here today isn't just about me. It's about the countless others who face this kind of treatment every single day. And I won't stand for it." With that, she turned on her heel and walked toward his office, motioning for him to follow. Once inside, she closed the door behind them, ensuring their conversation stayed private. Sitting down across from him, she placed her laptop on his desk and opened it. Within seconds, she was logged into her company's financial systems. "I'm ending our partnership," she announced, her voice calm but resolute. "Effective immediately, Sterling Trust Bank will no longer handle any of my personal or corporate finances." Richard's face paled. He realized the gravity of what was happening. Losing a client like Ava wasn't just a minor inconvenience, it was a catastrophic blow to the bank's reputation and bottom line. Desperate, he tried to reason with her. "Please give us another chance. We'll do whatever it takes to make this right." But Ava wasn't swayed. She had spent years building her empire, overcoming obstacles that would have broken most people. She didn't owe anyone leniency, especially not a bank that had failed to respect her basic dignity. "I don't need another chance from you," she replied. "What I needed was fairness and professionalism. And since you couldn't provide that, I'll take my business elsewhere." As she typed furiously on her laptop, initiating the termination of their partnership, Richard watched helplessly. 7 minutes. That's all it took for Ava to dismantle years of trust between her company and Sterling Trust Bank. When she finally stood up to leave, there was no trace of anger on her face, only determination. Walking back through the lobby, Ava noticed the stares from the staff and customers. Some looked confused, while others seemed intrigued. Whatever they were thinking, one thing was certain. Word of this incident would spread far beyond these walls. As she stepped outside into the sunlight, Ava felt a strange sense of relief. She had taken a stand, not just for herself, but for everyone who deserved better. Little did she know, this was only the beginning. What happened next would send shockwaves through the banking industry, spark nationwide debates, and inspire countless others to demand change. By the time Ava stepped out of the bank, her mind was racing with thoughts about what had just happened. She knew the incident wasn't just about her, it was a reflection of something much bigger. It was about how people judged others based on appearances, assumptions, and biases they didn't even realize they had. And while she couldn't change the entire system in one day, she could make sure this moment wasn't forgotten. As she walked back to her car, Ava pulled out her phone. She opened LinkedIn, a platform where professionals shared their stories and insights. For a few moments she hesitated. Writing about what had happened meant putting herself out there, exposing not only the bank but also her own emotions. But then she thought about all the times she had stayed silent in the past, choosing not to rock the boat. This time felt different. This time, she knew she had to speak up. Her fingers moved quickly across the screen as she typed out a detailed post. She started by explaining what had happened at the bank, the questions, the doubt, the blatant disrespect, and made it clear that it wasn't an isolated issue. She wrote about how systemic racism and bias often showed up in subtle ways, like being treated differently at a bank or store simply because of the color of your skin. She tagged Sterling Trust Bank in the post, holding them accountable for their actions, and called out the need for real change in how financial institutions operated. When she hit post, Ava didn't expect the reaction to come so fast. Within minutes, notifications began flooding in. People were sharing her story, commenting on it, and tagging their friends. Some expressed outrage, others offered support, and many shared their own experiences of facing discrimination in similar situations. One person wrote about being questioned repeatedly at a grocery store checkout while using a credit card. Another talked about being followed around a store by security guards simply because of how they looked. The comments kept coming, each one adding another layer to the conversation. By lunchtime, Ava's post had gone viral. News outlets picked up the story, turning it into headlines across social media platforms and websites. Journalists reached out to her for interviews, eager to hear more about what had happened. Influential figures in the business world weighed in, criticizing Sterling Trust Bank and praising Ava for standing up against injustice. The backlash was swift and intense, with customers starting to close their accounts en masse. Hashtags like "Stand with Ava" and "Accountability in Banking" began trending online, amplifying the message even further. Meanwhile, Sterling Trust Bank scrambled to respond. They issued a public apology, claiming that the incident was an unfortunate misunderstanding and promising to investigate the matter thoroughly. They even offered Ava restitution, hoping to repair the damage. But Ava wasn't interested in empty gestures. She ignored their attempts to reach out, knowing that words alone wouldn't fix the deeper problems within the institution. The ripple effects of her post spread beyond the banking industry. People everywhere started talking about the importance of representation and fairness in financial services. Small business owners, entrepreneurs, and everyday individuals shared their frustrations about being treated unfairly by banks. Many pointed out that these kinds of incidents weren't rare. They were part of a pattern, one that needed to be addressed head-on. For Ava, seeing the overwhelming response reinforced why she had spoken up in the first place. It wasn't just about calling out one manager or one bank. It was about shining a light on a broken system and demanding better. As the hours passed, she realized that this moment could be a catalyst for something much bigger, a movement toward true equality and justice. That evening, as Ava sat in her home office reflecting on everything that had unfolded, she felt a mix of emotions. There was pride in knowing she had taken a stand, but also sadness at the realization of how widespread the problem was. She thought about all the people who had faced similar situations and never said anything, either because they didn't have the platform or because they feared retaliation. She wanted to do more, to create something that would empower those voices and give them a seat at the table. An idea began forming in her mind. What if she could build a new kind of bank? A bank that prioritized fairness, accessibility, and inclusivity. A bank that understood the needs of underrepresented communities and worked to uplift them instead of marginalize them. The more she thought about it, the clearer the vision became. This wasn't just an opportunity to hold Sterling Trust accountable. It was a chance to reimagine what banking could look like. Over the next few days, Ava threw herself into planning. She reached out to trusted advisors, investors, and colleagues, pitching the concept of a new financial institution. She called it Equity Financial Group, EFG, emphasizing its mission to provide equitable opportunities for everyone, regardless of background or circumstances. Her pitch resonated deeply with those she spoke to, especially after the recent scandal involving Sterling Trust. Investors lined up to support her vision, recognizing not only the moral imperative behind it, but also the massive untapped market it aimed to serve. Construction plans were drawn up for a state-of-the-art headquarters, designed to be more than just a building. Alongside the main offices, Ava included community centers where people could attend free workshops on financial literacy, entrepreneurship, and wealth management. These programs would target underserved populations, teaching them skills that could help break cycles of poverty and inequality. Schools and nonprofits partnered with EFG to expand its reach, creating mentorship programs for young entrepreneurs eager to follow in Ava's footsteps. While Sterling Trust continued to struggle with the fallout from the scandal, losing clients and credibility, Ava focused on building something meaningful. Every brick laid for EFG's headquarters symbolized progress, not just for her but for everyone who believed in a fairer future. The contrast between the two institutions couldn't have been starker. One clinging to outdated practices and biases, the other paving the way for innovation and inclusion. Looking back on that chaotic week, Ava knew she had made the right decision. Yes, it had been exhausting and emotionally draining, but it had also been empowering. She had turned a deeply personal experience into a force for good, inspiring countless others along the way. And though the road ahead wouldn't be easy, she was ready to face whatever challenges came her way. After all, she had already proven that when you stand up for what's right, anything is possible. As the dust began to settle from the viral storm Ava had sparked, she knew this was no time to slow down. The public outrage against Sterling Trust Bank showed no signs of fading, and Ava felt a deep responsibility to keep the momentum going. This wasn't just about holding one bank accountable, it was about creating lasting change. She wanted to turn this moment into something bigger, something that would outlive the headlines and make a real difference in people's lives. With her idea for Equity Financial Group, EFG, taking shape, Ava threw herself into the project with the same relentless energy that had fueled her rise to success. But this time it wasn't just about building a business, it was about building trust. Trust that had been broken by institutions like Sterling Trust. Trust that needed to be rebuilt, brick by brick, for communities who had long been overlooked or mistreated by traditional banks. The first step was assembling a team that shared her vision. Ava reached out to some of the brightest minds in finance, technology, and community development. She didn't just look for experts, she looked for people who understood what it meant to be excluded or underestimated. Many of them had faced their own struggles, whether it was being denied loans despite having solid business plans, or being talked down to by bankers who assumed they didn't know how to manage money. These experiences gave them a unique perspective, one that aligned perfectly with EFG's mission. Together, they began designing a bank unlike any other. Instead of focusing solely on profits, EFG prioritized accessibility and empowerment. For example, they introduced flexible loan options tailored specifically for small businesses and startups owned by underrepresented groups. Traditional banks often required mountains of paperwork and collateral that many couldn't afford. But EFG streamlined the process, using innovative algorithms to assess potential rather than just past performance. They also offered free financial counseling services helping clients build credit, save money, and plan for the future. But Ava didn't stop there. She envisioned EFG as more than just a place to deposit checks or take out loans. It was going to be a hub for education and growth. That's why she decided to include community centers within the bank's headquarters. These spaces would host workshops, seminars, and networking events aimed at teaching people practical skills like budgeting, investing, and entrepreneurship. The goal was simple: give people the tools they needed to succeed financially, so they could break free from cycles of poverty and inequality. To ensure these programs reached as many people as possible, Ava partnered with schools, nonprofits, and local organizations. Teachers brought students to the community centers for hands-on learning sessions, showing them how math and economics applied to real life. Nonprofits used the space to train adults re-entering the workforce after years away, and entrepreneurs came together to share ideas, resources, and advice, forming networks that extended far beyond the walls of EFG. Word about EFG spread quickly, especially among those who had felt shut out by mainstream banking. Social media played a big role here too. People posted photos of themselves attending workshops or sharing testimonials about how EFG had helped them secure funding for their dreams. One woman wrote about how she finally got the loan she needed to open her bakery, a dream she'd been chasing for years but kept getting turned down for because of her lack of formal experience. Another man shared how the financial literacy classes taught him how to save enough to buy his first home, something he never thought was possible. As EFG grew, so did its impact. It became more than just a bank. It became a symbol of hope. For generations, marginalized communities had been told they weren't good enough, smart enough, or trustworthy enough to participate fully in the economy. EFG flipped that narrative on its head, proving that when given the right opportunities, anyone could thrive. Of course, not everyone was thrilled about Ava's new venture. Critics argued that EFG's focus on underserved populations was risky, pointing to stereotypes about defaults and bad investments. But Ava brushed off their skepticism. She knew better than anyone that risk wasn't inherent to certain groups. It was a product of systemic barriers that prevented those groups from succeeding. By removing those barriers, EFG wasn't just helping individuals, it was strengthening entire communities. Meanwhile, Sterling Trust Bank continued to flounder. Despite their public apologies and promises of reform, customers kept leaving in droves. Trust, once lost, was hard to regain. Their reputation suffered even more when internal documents leaked, revealing discriminatory practices that went far beyond what happened to Ava. Employees spoke out anonymously, describing a toxic culture where bias thrived unchecked. Regulators launched investigations, adding another layer of scrutiny to the embattled institution. For Ava, watching Sterling Trust unravel wasn't about revenge, it was validation. Validation that standing up for yourself mattered, that speaking your truth could spark change, and most importantly, that power, when wielded responsibly, could dismantle systems designed to hold people back. But Ava didn't dwell on Sterling Trust's downfall. Her focus remained firmly on the future she was building through EFG. Every ribbon-cutting ceremony, every workshop held, and every client served reminded her why she had started this journey in the first place. She wasn't just creating a bank, she was creating a legacy. Years later, when people looked back on the scandal that rocked the banking industry, they wouldn't just remember the drama or the headlines. They'd remember Ava Thompson, the woman who refused to stay silent, who turned pain into purpose, and who proved that true leadership wasn't about titles or wealth. It was about lifting others up, breaking down barriers, and paving the way for a fairer world. And while Ava knew the fight for equality was far from over, she took pride in knowing she had moved the needle, even if just a little. After all, change didn't happen overnight. It happened one courageous step at a time. Years had passed since that fateful day at Sterling Trust Bank, but the ripple effects of Ava's bold actions continued to shape industries and lives. What started as a single incident of discrimination had evolved into a movement, a testament to the power of standing up for what's right. For Ava, it wasn't just about personal vindication anymore. It was about creating a world where no one else would have to face the same indignities she had endured. By now, Equity Financial Group, EFG, had grown far beyond anyone's expectations. The headquarters stood tall in the heart of the city, a gleaming structure that symbolized hope, resilience, and progress. Its glass walls reflected the skyline, but more importantly, they represented transparency, something Ava believed traditional banks sorely lacked. Inside, the building buzzed with activity. Employees moved between offices and conference rooms while clients streamed in and out of the community centers, eager to learn and grow. The success of EFG wasn't measured solely by numbers, though those were impressive too. Within 5 years, the bank had served over 500,000 customers, dispersed millions in loans, and helped launch thousands of small businesses. But what truly set EFG apart was its impact on people's lives. It wasn't uncommon to hear stories of families breaking free from debt cycles, young entrepreneurs opening their first stores, or retirees finally achieving financial stability after decades of struggle. These weren't just statistics, they were real victories. Each one a reminder of why Ava had poured her heart into this project. One such story came from a woman named Teresa, who walked into EFG with nothing but a dream and a sketchbook full of designs. She wanted to start a sustainable fashion brand, but had been turned away by every bank she approached. "They told me I didn't have enough experience," she recalled during an interview. "But when I came to EFG, they didn't just see my lack of credentials, they saw my potential." With the help of a low-interest loan and mentorship programs offered through the community center, Teresa launched her clothing line. Within 2 years, her designs were being sold in major department stores across the country. "I wouldn't be here without EFG," she said, tears welling up in her eyes. "They gave me a chance when no one else would." Stories like Teresa's were everywhere, testaments to the transformative power of opportunity. And Ava made sure these stories were shared widely. Through social media campaigns, documentaries, and partnerships with influencers, EFG highlighted the successes of its clients, inspiring others to believe in their own potential. The message was clear: if you're willing to work hard and take risks, there's a place for you at EFG. But Ava didn't stop at serving adults. She understood that true change began with the next generation. That's why she expanded EFG's outreach programs to include schools and youth organizations. Students as young as 10 participated in workshops designed to teach them the basics of saving, investing, and budgeting. High schoolers competed in entrepreneurship challenges, pitching ideas for startups and winning seed funding to bring them to life. College students received internships at EFG, gaining hands-on experience in finance and technology while earning stipends to support themselves. For many of these young people, EFG became a second home. They saw Ava not just as a CEO but as a role model, a living example of what was possible when determination met opportunity. One high school senior named Kevin wrote a heartfelt letter to Ava, thanking her for changing his perspective on money and success. "Before I joined your program, I thought rich people were born rich," he wrote. "Now I know that wealth isn't about luck, it's about learning and working hard. You showed me that I can create my own future." Kevin's words stayed with Ava long after she read them. They reminded her of her own journey, the countless times she'd been underestimated or dismissed, and how she had refused to let those setbacks define her. Now, through EFG, she was giving others the tools and confidence to do the same. Of course, building EFG wasn't without its challenges. There were skeptics who doubted whether a bank focused on underserved communities could sustain itself financially. Some critics accused Ava of being idealistic, warning that her approach was unsustainable in the cutthroat world of banking. But Ava never wavered. She knew that profitability and purpose weren't mutually exclusive. By prioritizing long-term relationships over short-term gains, EFG proved that doing good and doing well could coexist. There were also moments of doubt within Ava herself. Running a business of this scale required sacrifices, late nights, missed family events, and constant pressure to deliver results. Yet every time she felt overwhelmed, she reminded herself of the bigger picture. This wasn't just about her, it was about everyone who had ever been told they didn't belong. Every loan approved, every workshop held, and every life changed reinforced her belief that the fight was worth it. As EFG flourished, so did Ava's reputation. She became a sought-after speaker at conferences, universities, and corporate events, sharing her insights on leadership, diversity, and innovation. Her talks weren't filled with jargon or empty platitudes. They were raw, honest, and deeply personal. She spoke openly about her struggles, her triumphs, and the lessons she'd learned along the way. Audiences left her speeches inspired, armed with practical advice and a renewed sense of possibility. Despite her growing fame, Ava remained grounded. She still visited the community centers regularly, rolling up her sleeves to teach classes or sit down with clients one-on-one. She remembered the names of the people she met, asking about their families, their businesses, and their dreams. To her, they weren't just customers, they were partners in a shared mission. Looking back, Ava marveled at how far she'd come. From that humiliating encounter at Sterling Trust Bank to the creation of a financial institution that was reshaping lives, her journey was proof that adversity could be transformed into opportunity. She often thought about Richard Langston, the branch manager who had doubted her that day. While she harbored no ill will toward him personally, she couldn't help but feel a quiet satisfaction knowing that his actions had inadvertently set her on this path. Sterling Trust Bank, meanwhile, struggled to recover from the scandal. Despite hiring consultants and launching diversity initiatives, the damage was done. Customers continued to leave, and employees grew disillusioned. Eventually, the bank merged with a larger institution, fading into obscurity. For Ava, this was a sobering reminder of the consequences of failing to adapt and evolve. Institutions that clung to outdated practices and biases risked becoming irrelevant, not just in business, but in society as a whole. Ava's story resonated far beyond the banking industry. It sparked conversations about systemic racism, economic inequality, and the importance of representation in leadership roles. People began demanding accountability from corporations, pushing them to examine their policies and practices through a lens of fairness and inclusion. Slowly but surely, the tide was turning. As she stood on the rooftop of EFG's headquarters one evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon, Ava allowed herself a moment of reflection. She thought about all the lives touched by EFG, all the barriers broken, and all the futures yet to be shaped. She knew there was still much work to be done. The fight for equality was ongoing, but she took pride in knowing she had laid a strong foundation. Her journey wasn't just about building a bank or even a movement. It was about proving that courage, compassion, and conviction could change the world. And as long as there were people willing to stand up and speak out, the possibilities were endless. Years later, as Ava sat in her office on the top floor of Equity Financial Group's headquarters, she couldn't help but reflect on the incredible journey that had brought her here. The view from her window was breathtaking, a sprawling cityscape, dotted with lights, a symbol of life, ambition, and endless possibilities. But for Ava, the real beauty wasn't in the skyline. It was in the lives she had touched and the change she had helped create. What started as a deeply personal moment of injustice had blossomed into something far greater, a legacy of empowerment, resilience, and hope. Ava often thought about how everything had unfolded. That single incident at Sterling Trust Bank could have easily been brushed aside, chalked up to one bad day or just another example of bias. But instead, she had chosen to act. And in doing so, she had ignited a fire that spread far beyond what she could have imagined. Her decision to call out discrimination hadn't just exposed flaws in the banking system, it had inspired thousands of people to demand better, not just for themselves but for their communities. One of the most rewarding aspects of building EFG was seeing how it became a beacon of trust for those who had long felt excluded. Traditional banks often operated behind closed doors, making decisions that seemed arbitrary and impersonal. At EFG, transparency was key. Clients weren't just numbers, they were individuals with dreams, challenges, and untapped potential. Every interaction was designed to make them feel valued and respected. Whether it was a loan officer taking extra time to explain terms or a counselor helping someone budget for the first time, the focus was always on building relationships, The impact extended beyond finances. Many clients reported feeling a renewed sense of confidence after working with EFG. For years, they had been told, directly or indirectly, that they didn't belong in spaces like these. But EFG flipped that narrative, showing them that they not only belonged, but also had the power to shape their own futures. One client, an elderly woman named Rosa, summed it up perfectly during a community event. "For so long I thought banks were for other people, not for me," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "But this place made me feel like I mattered, like my dreams mattered." Rosa's story was one of many. She had come to EFG seeking guidance on managing her retirement savings, unsure if she even qualified for assistance. Instead of turning her away, counselors worked closely with her, teaching her how to maximize her funds and plan for the future. By the end of the program, Rosa not only had a solid financial strategy but also a newfound belief in herself. "I used to think I was too old to learn new things," she admitted. "Now I know it's never too late." As word of EFG's success spread, Ava found herself invited to speak at global forums, where leaders from various industries gathered to discuss solutions to systemic inequality. These events gave her a platform to share her vision on a larger scale. She spoke passionately about the importance of representation, not just in banking but in every sector. When you see someone who looks like you succeeding, it changes your perspective, she told a packed auditorium during one such conference. It shows you that success isn't reserved for a select few. It's available to anyone willing to work for it. Her speeches resonated deeply with audiences because they came from lived experience. Ava didn't shy away from sharing her struggles, the moments when she doubted herself, faced rejection, or felt the weight of prejudice. But she also emphasized the importance of perseverance. "You can't let setbacks define you," she would say. "Instead, use them as stepping stones. Each challenge is an opportunity to grow stronger and wiser." While Ava's achievements earned her widespread recognition, she remained humble. She knew none of this would have been possible without the support of her team and the trust of her clients. She often reminded herself that leadership wasn't about being the smartest person in the room. It was about lifting others up and creating opportunities for collective growth. This philosophy guided every decision she made, from hiring practices to community outreach programs. One of the proudest moments of Ava's career came when EFG partnered with a national nonprofit to launch a scholarship fund for underrepresented students pursuing careers in finance and technology. The initiative aimed to diversify the next generation of industry leaders, ensuring that voices from marginalized communities were heard and valued. Recipients of the scholarships were given mentorship, internships, and networking opportunities, setting them on paths to success. Watching these young men and women thrive filled Ava with immense pride. They were proof that the ripple effects of her work would continue long after she was gone. Of course, there were still challenges to face. Systemic issues couldn't be solved overnight, and Ava understood that true equality required sustained effort. But she refused to let cynicism creep in. Instead, she focused on progress, celebrating each victory along the way. Whether it was a small business owner opening their first storefront or a teenager landing their dream internship, every milestone reinforced her belief in the power of collective action. Looking back, Ava realized that her greatest accomplishment wasn't the wealth she accumulated or the accolades she received. It was the lives she had transformed, including her own. That fateful day at Sterling Trust Bank had tested her patience, her dignity, and her resolve. But rather than letting bitterness consume her, she had channeled her anger into purpose. In doing so, she had not only changed the trajectory of her life, but also paved the way for others to follow. Her story became a blueprint for resilience, a reminder that adversity could be turned into opportunity if approached with courage and creativity. People from all walks of life reached out to thank her, sharing how her journey had inspired them to confront their own challenges head-on. Some wrote letters, while others stopped by EFG's headquarters to express their gratitude in person. Each message reinforced Ava's belief that everyone had the capacity to make a difference, no matter how daunting the odds might seem. As she prepared to leave the office that evening, Ava paused to take one last look at the city below. The lights twinkled like stars against the night sky, a reminder of the countless dreams waiting to be realized. She thought about the road ahead, for EFG, for the communities it served, and for the world at large. There was still much work to be done, but she felt hopeful. Change was slow, yes, but it was inevitable. And as long as there were people willing to stand up, speak out, and lead with compassion, the future held boundless promise. With a smile, Ava turned off the lights and headed home. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and new stories to write. But for now, she allowed herself to bask in the knowledge that she had played a part in creating something extraordinary, something that would endure long after she was gone.